Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep beneath the surface, into the cold, echoing belly of a medieval castle. You probably wouldn't survive this job for long. Imagine managing the food supply for hundreds of hungry knights, servants, and nobles, all expecting their bread, cheese, and ale to appear like magic every single day, without refrigerators, without freezers, not even an icebox in sight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in a torchlit corridor, the air cool and damp, tasting faintly of earth and old stone. The castle above hums with muffled sounds, a clatter of armor, a distant dog bark, a burst of laughter echoing down the stairwell. But down here, beneath the weight of centuries, it's quiet. The air barely moves. You take a step forward and your boots scrape on stone worn smooth by thousands of feet before yours. These are the castle's veins, its cellars, its arteries of preservation, where everything that kept a fortress alive was hidden away from the light. Medieval builders, somehow, had cracked the code of natural refrigeration. They knew that the earth itself could protect what they needed most. Beneath the walls, the air holds steady, around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, about 13 Celsius, cool enough to slow decay, to stretch life, to make summers plenty last through the cold months. The deeper you walk, the colder it gets. You can almost see your breath now, swirling faintly in the flickering light. These underground cellars aren't just dark holes in the ground. They're carefully planned labyrinths. Food wasn't stored randomly, oh no. The deeper chambers were perfect for meats, cheeses, milk, and anything that needed the cold kiss of the earth. A few steps higher, where the air was slightly warmer and drier, came the wines and ciders, precious, sometimes more carefully guarded than gold. And up near the surface, roots, apples, and salted goods, waiting patiently like soldiers in ranks. You pass through one of the lower arches and into a cavernous storage hall. The walls gleam faintly with moisture. Barrels line the space like sentries, stacked neatly. Wine, ale, salted pork. Somewhere nearby, you catch the faint scent of aging cheese, sharp but oddly comforting. Servants worked here day and night, moving through these endless tunnels with lanterns, checking stores, rotating supplies. It was easy to get lost. Some castles were said to have miles of interconnected cellars. They stretched out beneath kitchens, courtyards, even under the moat. To keep from losing their way, servants drew chalk marks on the walls, small arrows pointing home. Medieval breadcrumbs, you could say. One unfortunate servant at Dover Castle reportedly vanished down here for 2 days. When they finally found him, he was curled up beside a wine barrel, claiming he got lost, and the wine kept him warm. You'd probably have done the same. But not all was cozy in these underground vaults. Rats were the constant enemy, the true medieval plague of the pantry. They chewed through sacks, gnawed barrels, and stole the winter's cheese with bold efficiency. The castle's best cats were prized employees, prowling the passages like ghostly guardians. Some fortresses even built cat runs, narrow crawlways carved into the stone walls, just big enough for feline patrols to slip through unseen. And then there was the water. Cellars flooded easily, especially in winter, when rain seeped through cracks and rose from the ground. Nothing ruins your morning like discovering your root cellar has become a subterranean lake. Some castles added drains or raised floors made of stone grates, letting the damp flow away beneath stored barrels. Others simply accepted the occasional soggy turnip as the price of castle life. You stop near a low archway where a faint draft brushes your face. The air feels different, fresher, somehow. This was another hidden secret of castle design. Builders had long noticed that air could be coaxed through stone. They built narrow shafts rising from the cellars up to the open air above. When the wind passed over the roof, it pulled air upward, drawing cool drafts from below. Natural ventilation, centuries before anyone had heard of HVAC. Some servants would sneak down here on hot summer days, sitting among the barrels just to cool off. The stone walls glowed faintly in torchlight, the silence broken only by the soft drip of water somewhere deeper in the dark. In the corner, a set of worn steps spirals downward, vanishing into the shadows. You descend slowly, your hand brushing the cold wall. The air grows heavier, cooler still. Here lie the castle's deepest vaults, the places where fresh meat was hung, where milk and butter were kept, where time itself seemed to pause. The smell is sharp and mineral, like the inside of a mountain. You can almost hear the daily rhythm, the creak of wooden buckets, the clink of metal hooks, the low murmur of workers checking lists by candlelight. You picture them wiping their hands on aprons, whispering about the weather, about harvests, about whether the Lord would demand more wine this week. Historians still wonder just how vast some of these cellars truly were. A few discovered tunnels stretch far beyond the castle walls, leading to nearby hills or even to distant outposts. Secret escape routes, or simply extra storage. No one really knows. But one thing's certain. Beneath every great castle lay another world entirely. One built not for war or glory, but for survival. You reach the farthest wall, rough, uneven, marked by centuries of use. A single candle flickers beside an ancient barrel, its wax pooled thick around the base. The air feels almost timeless here, untouched by everything that came after. You rest a hand on the stone, cool and slightly damp, and you can almost feel the heartbeat of the castle itself, slow, steady, patient. Up above, the nobles dine in flickering candlelight, raising goblets of spiced wine, unaware of the quiet miracle happening below them, that their feast, their comfort, their safety, depends entirely on this silent, cold, breathing world beneath their feet. You take one last look at the endless rows of barrels disappearing into darkness. Somewhere in that still air, history lingers, salted, sealed, and waiting for centuries to pass. You wake the next morning to the smell of fire, faint, distant, and oddly comforting. Somewhere above you, kitchen chimneys sigh, their smoke drifting into the pale dawn air. It smells of oak, meat, and something deeper, the slow work of time itself. In a medieval world without refrigeration, salt and smoke weren't just seasonings. They were survival. Together, they turned fleeting life, milk, meat, fish, into something that could last through hunger, storms, and siege. You make your way up from the damp cellar, following the narrow stone stairs toward the warmth. The temperature rises with every step. The walls glow golden as you near the kitchens. And then heat. A great hearth blazes before you, taller than a man and wide enough to roast a whole ox. Sparks crackle upward into the black mouth of a chimney. Iron pots hang from chains, their contents bubbling lazily. The floor is slick with old fat, straw, and the ghost of yesterday's feast. To one side, men and women stand by long wooden tables, their hands white with salt. They work quietly, methodically. In front of them, heaps of raw meat glisten in the torchlight. Beef, venison, boar. Each slab is rubbed, turned, and pressed beneath the thick, glimmering crust of salt. The sound is strangely soothing. The soft rasp of hands, the faint hiss as the salt draws out the moisture. You can smell it now, sharp, mineral, and clean. Salt, in this world, is worth nearly as much as gold. It comes in heavy blocks from distant mines, in England from Cheshire, in France from the great pans of the Atlantic coast, and in the north, from trade routes that stretched deep into the Baltic. Castles stored it carefully, locked in barrels under guard. It preserved meat, yes, but also status. To have enough salt meant you had enough power to last the winter. As you watch, a servant spreads the salted meat across wide racks of wood. The air grows thick with smoke as others feed the fire. Oak, beech, applewood. The smoke curls around everything, slow and deliberate, carrying whispers of spice and resin. It's not just for flavor. Smoke seals the surface, drives away insects, and leaves behind a protective film of tar and oil. The process takes days, sometimes weeks. In the dim light of the smokehouse, shapes hang like strange fruit, sausages, hams, sides of bacon, even fish from the nearby river, all suspended in the haze, turning slowly golden brown. You step closer. The warmth on your face feels alive. The smell is heavy, sweet, rich, ancient. It clings to your hair, your clothes, your skin. Smokehouses were more than just kitchen buildings. They were sacred places, quiet, almost devotional. Tending them was an art, passed down from one cook to another. Too much fire, and the meat turned bitter. Too little, and rot crept in unseen. The perfect balance meant life could stretch weeks, even months longer. Outside, the salted goods hang in cool air, draped in linen. They'll be stored later in the upper cellars, rotated with almost religious care. Each piece of meat marked, dated, recorded. In siege times, this food could mean the difference between holding the walls and falling to starvation. But salt and smoke weren't only used on meat. You move deeper into the kitchen and find women crouched beside smaller fires, tending to trays of cheese, pale and soft. They're rubbing salt into each wheel by hand, pressing it into cracks and folds, then leaving it near the smoke to harden its rind. Further on, another group tends to fish, herring mostly, and cod. They split, clean, and layer them in barrels, each layer sealed under a crust of salt. Then they add more and more until the barrel is full, heavy, ready to travel. Some of this will be sent hundreds of miles away, to monasteries, ships, even distant markets. The medieval world, in all its poverty, was linked by salt. You look down at your hands. They feel dry, rough from the air. The salt stings small cuts you didn't know were there. You rub them together and realize this is what every worker here felt daily, the quiet burn of survival. A boy passes you carrying a small wooden scoop. He heads toward the hearth, where a cook is stirring a blackened pot. You peek inside. It's full of chunks of salted beef simmering in ale and herbs. Tonight's stew, softened by slow heat until the salt yields and the meat returns to life. The smell is intoxicating. The cook grins at you, a face red with heat and lined with sweat, and gestures toward the pot. "We feed them what lasts," he says, his voice hoarse from smoke. "The rest is just flavor." You stay for a while, watching the rhythm, salt, hang, smoke, store, repeated over and over, season after season. The castle breathes through this cycle, its life tied to the work of these unseen hands. You realize something, standing there. Salt and smoke didn't just preserve food. They preserved the people who used them, their knowledge, their taste, their resilience. Every preserved piece of meat or cheese or fish carried within it the proof that they had mastered time, if only for a moment. Later, when the fires die down, the workers will rest. The smoke will thin, drifting lazily out the chimney and into the pale blue sky. The salted barrels will wait in the cellars below, stacked and silent. And life, the fragile, flickering kind that humans cling to through every age, will keep going, one handful of salt and one wisp of smoke at a time. You close your eyes and breathe in the scent one last time. It's heavy, earthy, human. Somewhere far above, in the great hall, they'll soon ring the bell for dinner, and none of the nobles will think, even for a second, about the people below who made survival possible. But you know now, you've seen it, how something as small as a handful of salt could hold back hunger, rot, and even death itself. And as you turn toward the doorway, the last light of the fire flickers against the walls, a brief reminder that in the dark centuries of the past, preservation wasn't a luxury. It was a quiet act of defiance. The fire fades behind you, leaving only a faint warmth on your back as you step once more into the cool corridors. The scent of smoke lingers in your hair, sharp and comforting, a reminder of the work you've just witnessed. But ahead, the air changes. It grows tangier, brighter. You catch a strange, mouth-watering smell that makes you pause, sour, sweet, alive. You follow it down a narrow stone hallway and emerge into a smaller chamber bathed in dappled light. Sunlight filters through narrow slits in the wall, landing across rows of glass and earthen jars, hundreds of them, gleaming faintly like a quiet sea of amber and green. Inside each one, something floats. Carrots, onions, garlic, pears, plums, whole eggs, smooth and pale beneath translucent liquid. Tiny herbs, dill, fennel, thyme, drifting like seaweed. You're standing in the castle's pickling room. This is where summer is kept alive. A woman in a linen apron moves between the tables, her hands quick and sure. She takes a bunch of small cucumbers and lays them gently into a clay pot, one layer at a time, sprinkling salt and mustard seeds between each. Then she pours in a cloudy liquid that fills the air with its bite. Vinegar, brewed from last year's wine. The smell hits you, a sting in your nose, a strange thrill in your throat. It smells like the memory of something fresh. Vinegar, you learn, wasn't waste here. It was a miracle. Every castle and village that brewed wine or ale also produced vinegar, often by accident, when a cask turned sour. But where others saw ruin, medieval cooks saw preservation. Vinegar stopped decay, brightened flavor, and, when mixed with honey or herbs, became medicine, cleanser, even perfume. You walk along the tables, tracing your fingers along jars of all shapes and colors. Some glow golden, some deep red, some green as moss. Each holds a story, a summer plum captured in amber, an apple floating beside a cinnamon stick, a garlic clove suspended in honey-colored brine. Every one of them is waiting for winter. The woman looks up at you and smiles faintly, a streak of vinegar glistening on her wrist. "We pickle what we cannot guard," she says softly. "It keeps the hunger out." You realize what she means. Salted meat feeds the body, but these jars feed the soul. When the snow buries the fields and the world turns gray, color and flavor matter more than anyone admits. A bite of something sour, something alive, reminds you that spring still exists. She gestures for you to follow her deeper into the room. At the back stands a great wooden barrel filled with liquid the color of pale gold. She dips a ladle in and offers it to you. You take a cautious sip. It burns lightly on your tongue, sharp, sweet, with a faint note of apple. Cider vinegar, she says, made from windfall fruit. Not good enough for the table, but good enough for life. She laughs quietly, not mocking, but proud. The vinegar, she explains, was also used for cleaning, for rinsing wounds, for washing linen and hair. Some women even soaked cloths in it during plague seasons, believing the sour scent could keep death itself away. You look around. The jars stretch into the shadows, packed close together on wooden shelves. You notice labels scratched into the sides. Turnip, 1328. Plums, 1330. Garlic, 1331. Each jar has survived years, maybe decades. Carefully sealed with wax or cloth, some might still be edible. It feels like walking through a time capsule, one filled not with gold or jewels, but with color, taste, and care. You move toward a smaller table at the far end. There, another worker is mixing something different, not for food, but for the castle's infirmary. You watch as she crushes herbs into a paste, rosemary, sage, mint, then stirs them into vinegar until the liquid turns cloudy green. She glances up at you and murmurs, "For fevers, for bites, for those who cannot keep food." Then she ties a strip of linen around the jar's neck and sets it aside. In a world before antibiotics, before sanitation, vinegar was a quiet guardian. It cleansed what couldn't be cured. It softened wounds, kept rot at bay, and flavored water that might otherwise make you sick. You begin to understand why this room feels so different from the smoky chaos of the kitchens below. Here, everything is calm, deliberate. Preservation is not just about survival, it's about patience, about trust in time. You take a slow breath. The air is thick with overlapping scents, sweet honey, sharp vinegar, peppery herbs. It's almost dizzying. You realize how alive this space feels, how every jar is part of a living system, bubbling faintly as fermentation continues in the dark. In the corner, a boy carefully tilts a jar, checking for leaks. Beside him, a few barrels of sauerkraut rest under cloths weighed down by stones. The fermentation gives off soft popping sounds, like distant whispers. It strikes you that the people of this time didn't just store food, they transformed it. They used salt and air and acid to change life into another form, one that could endure. In every jar, there's a small defiance of nature, a refusal to let decay win. Outside, the sun is sinking. The last rays slip through the narrow window slits and scatter across the jars, setting them aglow. 1,000 tiny suns trapped in glass. You watch the light dance on the vinegar's surface and imagine the taste of these preserved worlds. Sweet plums in winter, sharp onions beside roasted meat, a sip of honey vinegar for a fevered night. The woman from before passes by you again, carrying a basket of herbs. "We'll seal the last of the pears tonight," she says. "Then it's time for the beekeepers." You tilt your head. "Beekeepers?" She smiles. "You'll see. Without them, nothing keeps sweet." You follow her gaze toward the open doorway, where the scent of smoke fades and something softer begins to drift in. The faint perfume of flowers, honey, and open air. The day is ending, and the castle hums with its quiet work. But your journey isn't done yet. There's one more secret to discover, one that glitters golden in the light of dusk. And so you turn toward the meadow, toward the hives that wait just beyond the castle walls. By the time you leave the pickling chambers, the air has changed completely. The sharp sting of vinegar fades behind you, replaced by something warm and golden, the scent of open fields, of summer preserved in slow sunlight. You climb a narrow stairway and emerge into the courtyard. The sky is blushing toward evening, and the castle walls catch the last of the light. Beyond the outer gates, Through a small wooden arch, a path leads toward the meadows. And there, in the distance, you see them, rows of wooden boxes scattered among tall grass and flowers that sway like quiet waves. The beekeepers' hives. You walk toward them slowly, drawn by the low hum that rises and falls like breathing. Bees drift lazily through the air, golden flecks against the fading light. The smell is soft, a mixture of wildflowers, wax, and the faintest hint of sweetness that seems to melt into your skin as you breathe it in. A man in a rough linen hood is kneeling by one of the hives. His hands move carefully, reverently. He looks more like a priest at an altar than a farmer at work. You watch as he lifts a frame coated in glistening gold, a honeycomb heavy with liquid sunlight. He nods to you without surprise, as if he's been expecting you. "You've seen the salt," he says softly. "You've seen the smoke. Now you'll see how sweetness survives." He tilts the frame, and a single drop of honey falls, slow and thick, into the bucket below. The sound is tiny, but it echoes somehow, like a heartbeat. In the medieval world, honey was more than food. It was magic. Before sugar found its way to Europe, honey was the only true sweetness. It flavored wine and ale, filled pastries, sweetened medicines, and sealed wounds. It preserved fruits, herbs, and even bodies, saints and nobles wrapped in honeyed cloth to slow decay. Honey was both a luxury and a medicine, and to those who tended it, it was almost sacred. You kneel beside the beekeeper and peer into the hive. The comb glows in the light, geometric perfection made by tireless, invisible workers. You can feel the warmth radiating from it, alive and pulsing. He tells you that every castle with means kept hives, some in gardens, some on rooftops, some deep in the forest, guarded by walls or wooden fences to keep out bears and thieves. The honey fed not just the kitchens, but the apothecaries, the mead makers, the monks who brewed golden liquor for the soul. You glance at a nearby table where jars of fresh honey glisten beside small cloth-wrapped bundles of beeswax. The wax will become candles, pure, bright, slow-burning. In the dark nights of winter, when tallow stinks and smokes, beeswax burns clean, smelling faintly of flowers and light. The rich could always be found by its glow. The beekeeper places the comb into a clay basin and begins to press. The honey oozes out in thick rivers, gathering in a pool that catches the last red of the sunset. You can almost taste it, rich, wild, and slightly tangy. He scoops a little with his finger and offers it to you. It's warm, alive. You've never tasted anything like it. It's as if the air, the grass, and the sun itself have dissolved on your tongue. He chuckles quietly. "This," he says, "is the only sweetness that doesn't lie. The bees give it freely, if you're patient enough to wait." You walk with him to a nearby wooden bench. Around you, the bees drift like small, lazy spirits, each one busy, each one purposeful. He sets down the jar and tells you how honey kept the castle alive in ways no one above ever thought about. When vinegar failed, honey preserved. When wounds festered, honey healed. When winter dulled the spirit, honey sweetened what little remained. Monks wrote entire treatises about it, its warmth, its purity, its power to banish corruption. Some called it the sun made solid. He gestures to the hives again. "The secret," he says, "is that this isn't just food. It's memory. Every flower the bees touched still lives in it. Every season is trapped inside. You think back to the jars in the cellar, to the salt and smoke, and realize that everything the castle preserved, every method, every ritual, was an attempt to hold on to something fleeting. But honey doesn't resist time the way salt does. It moves with it. It flows. The bees don't fight decay, they transform it. And so does the honey. As the last light fades, the meadow hums with the sound of life continuing, small wings beating against the coming dark. The beekeeper gathers his jars, one by one, and carries them toward the castle gate. Inside, the cooks will use the honey for glazing meats, brewing ale, sealing fruits, mixing medicines. Each drop will touch 100 lives before winter ends. You linger for a moment, watching the hives. The hum rises and falls, soft as breathing. The air feels thick with warmth, even as night begins to fall. You imagine the bees inside, working in their perfect patterns, building, mending, surviving. You wonder if they know how much depends on them, how their small labor keeps sweetness alive in a world so full of stone and iron and cold. The beekeeper pauses at the gate and turns back to you. Every castle has its keepers, he says, the ones who fight to hold the world together. The bees just do it better than we do. He disappears into the shadows, leaving you alone in the meadow. The first stars have appeared, pale and flickering above the darkening towers. You look down at your hands and see a faint golden smear of honey glowing in the fading light. You taste it one last time before it's gone. It's still sweet, still warm, still alive. And for a moment, in that small, shining sweetness, the entire medieval world feels as though it's still breathing. Night has settled across the castle now, that deep, velvet dark that seems to hush even the wind. The fires in the great hall burn low, their glow pulsing softly through narrow windows. Somewhere above, the nobles dine and laugh, the clink of goblets echoing faintly down the corridors. But here, in the quiet heart of the keep, the real life of the castle endures. You walk once more through the kitchens, now emptied of their day's noise. The hearths are dark, the ashes still faintly warm. Hanging from the beams above are the same sides of salted meat, the same strings of herbs, the same baskets of dried fruit, silent witnesses to centuries of hunger and patience. The air smells of smoke and stone and time. Everywhere you look, the tools of preservation remain. Jars glinting in candlelight, barrels resting in neat rows, slabs of meat glistening faintly in the cool. Everything here has a rhythm, not the rhythm of battle or prayer, but of endurance. The cook from before moves quietly through the shadows, lantern in hand. His steps are slow but sure, the way a man walks through a place he's tended all his life. He checks the salt barrels, taps one of the lids with a wooden staff, listens for the sound it makes, a dull, healthy thud. Not spoiled. Not yet. You follow him as he makes his rounds, past the cheese racks, the vinegar shelves, the rows of jars glowing softly in their amber sleep. He pauses by the door and listens. Beyond it, the night wind moans faintly through the stone vents, keeping the air in motion. He nods once, satisfied, and murmurs, still breathing. You realize he isn't talking about himself. He's talking about the castle, because that's what this place is, a body. The kitchens are its stomach, the cellars its lungs, the salt and smoke its pulse. Every servant, every cook, every beekeeper and brewer, every boy hauling firewood, they are its heartbeat. Without them, the fortress would starve, rot, collapse into silence. You can almost feel it if you close your eyes. The slow respiration of stone, of warmth moving downward, of cold air rising, of life and decay locked in their quiet dance. The cook places the lantern on a nearby shelf and sits down heavily on a stool. He wipes his hands on his apron and looks at you, his face lit by the small, trembling light. You can build walls as high as mountains, he says softly, but they won't save you if your bread spoils. You smile faintly, unsure if he expects an answer. He doesn't. He just keeps talking, the way people do when they've spent too many years with silence as their companion. The soldiers think they defend the castle with swords, he continues. But we defend it with barrels and brine. They fight one battle. We fight 100 winters. He gestures toward the stone ceiling above, where faint vibrations echo from the great hall. They don't know we're here, he says. They never really do. But when the snows come, or the gates close, or the river freezes, then they remember. Then they come looking for us. His voice grows quieter, and we always have something waiting. You picture it now. The siege, the hunger, the fear. The castle sealed off from the world. Its people surviving only because of what lies hidden below. You can almost hear the sounds of the past. Muffled footsteps, whispered prayers, the creak of barrels opened one by one. Salted meat boiled in a blackened pot. Pickled onions spooned from a jar. Honey stirred into bitter ale to soothe empty stomachs. In the darkness of war, these small acts were light. The cook rises again and lifts the lantern. You follow him through the last doorway, into the outer corridor where the night air drifts in through an open slit. It's cool and clean, carrying the scent of wet grass and distant rain. The castle's stones gleam faintly in the starlight. You look up at the massive walls, the narrow towers, the distant flicker of torches high above. It's easy to think of castles as monuments of war, of pride, of power. But now, after all you've seen, you know better. They were built for survival. Every block of stone, every iron hinge, every hidden passage and cellar was part of one long, quiet strategy, not to conquer, but to endure. To keep warmth against cold, food against time, life against decay. You step outside into the courtyard. The ground glistens with dew. The castle looms above you like a great sleeping creature, its breath slow, its walls thick with memory. From somewhere within, the faint hum of bees still lingers in your mind. The scent of smoke clings to your clothes. You pause and listen. There's no sound now but the wind moving gently across the battlements. And for a moment, the entire fortress feels alive, as if the centuries haven't passed at all, as if the people who salted, smoked, and sealed their world in jars still move somewhere just out of sight. Maybe they do, because in a way, they've never really left. Their work, those jars of vinegar and honey, those salted barrels in the dark, are still here, hidden beneath layers of time. Quiet, enduring, waiting. The lantern flame flickers once and goes out. You stand in the soft dark, the stars bright above the stone towers. The night air tastes faintly of salt, smoke, and sweetness. And you realize the castle isn't just a monument. It's a memory of how people once fought the inevitable, not with swords or fire, but with patience, craft, and care. You breathe in the cool air, heavy with history, and whisper to the silence around you. We kept the past alive, and for the briefest moment, it feels as though the castle whispers back,